I would honestly lean Kennard, I think.
Yes. If I were running the Clippers, I would go Jackson at the 1, Kennard at the 2, Terrence Mann at the 3, or Batum, depending on like what you kind of prefer. And then you kind of just put PG in the 4, like regardless of the lineups, and then Zubac and I guess Ibaka at the 5, either or, depending on what kind of teams you go into.
All right, let's go to the Los Angeles Clippers, Mort, who, have the last 2 years have been one of the favorites in the West. I don't think that will be the case this year, at least during the regular season, because Kawhi Leonard is going to be rehabbing from the partially torn ACL that he suffered in the playoffs. We've heard nothing definitive about a timetable for his return. Hopefully he comes back at some point this year. Hopefully he's healthy by the playoffs and we get, the Clippers are right back into that title mix. Until he does, who shoulders the load for this Clippers team other than Paul George?
Okay. See, that was
of course Paul George does, but who else?
I think it should be Luke Kennard. I think he got such a bad rap last season. I think he's better than what he demonstrated. I think the fan base went out on him really, really quickly. Always thought that was unfair. He is a guy who can shoot, who can handle the ball, who can play pick and roll basketball. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he's a guy who can become an 18-point scorer in this league. I think he needs an opportunity to do so under a good team and under a good coaching staff. So maybe with Kawhi out, this is their chance to rehab that value from him and like say, okay, we've gone through year 1. It didn't really work out that year. So let's give it another go this year, but in a different way. Like, let's give you the ball a little bit more. Let you and Paul George like kind of play off of each other a little bit more. We know you're a great spot up shooter. We know that you can play pick and roll basketball. We know that we can rely on you with the ball in your hands. So let's give you that role. It's not take you in off the bench and give you 17 minutes here and there. Like, let's actually give you a chance to get into rhythm, become an impactful offensive player. I am not out on Luke Kennard at all, and I understand there's skepticism around him, fair, but I think we're undervaluing just how good he is. So I would look at Kennard specifically. The one guy I wouldn't be looking to is Eric Bledsoe. I know that he's the guy that people are kind of pointing to. That's great, but you know what? He looked so horrid last year that I can't, in the right mind and with good conscience, sit here and go, oh yeah, he's going to bounce back because he's back in LA. Like, if he does, great. That would be awesome for the Clippers. It would be great for him. He could also use a bounce back year. He could also stand to rehab his perception around the league as well. So that would be great. I just don't trust it. I've seen nothing from him from the last year that gives me any indication that I can trust him in a larger capacity role.
Yeah, he's going to bounce back from when he averaged 6.7 points per game on 43% shooting during his 3 years with the Clippers. Like, that's not a high bar.
It really isn't.
And you're right. I mean, like, his time in Phoenix, he left the Clippers, went to Phoenix, started every game, looked great there, and then went to Milwaukee. He is a lesser version of Ben Simmons in that he's much better in the regular season than he is in the playoffs. But for the Clippers, it's really all that matters. If he needs to be that bridge until Kawhi comes back and then he takes a significantly reduced role going into the playoffs, good, that's fine. Like, I do think, he's going to be one of their leading scorers, but I'm with you. I would not necessarily prioritize him in the pecking order. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see who they go with in the starting lineup, honestly, because they have so many different options now. Paul George is a lock. I don't think
Brian.
I know.
This is why people listen to the NBA podcast. This is groundbreaking stuff.
Reggie Jackson, I would think is a lock, given what he did last year for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know who they go with between Ibaka and Zubac for their center.
Zubac.
Probably. That'd be my guess as well. But then do you start like, do you start Jackson as your point guard? Do you start Bledsoe and Jackson together? Do you start Jackson and Kennard? Do you start Terrence Mann, who had, that sensational performance in the playoffs? Where does Nick Batum fit in? Like, I'm guessing George, Marcus Morris, Zubac will be the starting front court. And then you have Ibaka coming off the bench. Justise Winslow as well. Like, they have so much flexibility in the types of lineups they can throw out there. They can go small. You can do a Marcus Morris at the 5 with Paul George and 3 shooters. You can go big. You can have Ibaka and Zubac together. I don't think that's a good idea necessarily, but you can if you want to. Paul George can play anywhere from the 2 to the 4. Nick Batum, same deal. Justise can be a 3. Hell, point Justise was a thing in Miami for a while. So I
years ago.
Yeah, I know. I have no idea who's going to be that starter next to Jackson. I would honestly lean Kennard, I think.
Yes. If I were running the Clippers, I would go Jackson at the 1, Kennard at the 2, Terrence Mann at the 3, or Batum, depending on like what you kind of prefer. Like, do you want to get a little bit of youth injection in there? Then you go with Terrence Mann. Do you want to go with some veteran legs and some leadership? Okay, then you go Batum, and then you kind of just put PG in the 4, like regardless of the lineups, just play him at the 4. He's long enough, he's tall enough, it'll work. And then Zubac and I guess Ibaka at the 5, either or, depending on what kind of teams you go into. Like, we're looking at an NBA that's becoming increasingly more dynamic. So I wouldn't even be shocked if the Clippers go into the season thinking, you know what, some nights Zubac will start at the center because that works for our initial matchups. Other times he'll come off the bench and Serge is going to come in and be our starter. So, but I definitely think Kennard should start at the 2, and I think Paul George should be locked in at the 4 and Jackson at the 1. Those are the 3 spots that I think should be guaranteed. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's what I would do.
Yeah, I would Marcus Morris started most, if not every game last year.
Yeah, and they're also paying him a ton of money, which...
Oh, no, he only started half of his games, actually. He started every game the year before.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
So, yeah, okay. So maybe... Because they don't really have a good playmaking option off the bench either. So I think Bledsoe makes more sense at this point of his career as the super sub 6th man than he does as a starter. And I think if Ty Lue can get him on board with that role, that's where he could be the most effective, both like individually, because he could feast against most second unit point guards, and then as their team too. Like, you don't need 3 playmakers or 4 if you have Batum in the starting lineup. You don't need that many guys in the starting lineup with that skill set. You need, like, if Reggie Jackson and Paul George and Nick Batum are starting, a guy like Kennard or Terrence Mann would make more sense, because you need more scoring upside and shooting than you do Bledsoe, who is a shake, like, he'll take the shots, but he's not a great shot
maker. He won't hit them.
right. Yeah, 34.1% from 3 last year on 5 attempts per game. Like, you'd much prefer a Kennard who can hit 40% from 3. Right. So I just think, like, that's the biggest until Kawhi returns. Like, just who starts for this team? And we could go all day debating this. Like, I have no idea.
No, I didn't even realize Marcus Morris came off the bench as much as he did last season. I remember the playoffs when he was practically a full-time starter, 18 out of 19 games.
Yeah.
I would love that flexibility coming off the bench, though, because then you have Bledsoe and Marcus Morris and one of Ibaka or Zubac, kind of rounding out that second unit.
Plus possibly Mann and Justise Winslow. Like, they go 10 deep even without Kawhi.
Yeah, this is true. They actually have sneaky depth. That's fair.
Yeah.
But I that's what I would do. Like, I don't think if they're trying to make Morris like the secondary offensive guy, like he was in New York, I don't think that will work out for him. I know he was efficient in New York and all that, but that was not that was not a good team. So, they're kind of in a holding pattern. I think like this year, if Kawhi is lost throughout the entire course of this year, which he might, we don't know.
Right.
Then I just think it's a matter of getting some of the young guys that you kind of want to play moving forward a chance. Like if you have that entire position of Kawhi Leonard being put off the table and you have a chance to start a Luke Kennard or a Terrence Mann or just get those guys minutes, but you waste that just going all in on veterans, I kind of think you just wasted an entire season.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about Justise Winslow briefly, because the Grizzlies traded for him 2 years ago, did nothing for them that first season. Played last year, 26 games, but only 19.5 minutes, 6.8 points, shot only 35.2% from the field, 18.5 from three on 2.1 attempts per game. Like, this is a far cry from the 2018-19 version, who looked like one of these budding star forward potential secondary playmakers. Like this one, just a do-it-all, like what prime Nick Batum was almost.
Yeah, that's still not a star. I'm sorry. I'm always going to fight that, because I think NBA Twitter got their man love onto Justise Winslow, and I think it's time to rub that off a little bit, because he got overhyped to just perverse degrees over those years.
Yeah, I'm shocked that someone on the Miami Heat got overhyped. Who could have seen that coming? But what do you think? Like, can he find a niche on this Clippers team, and is there hope? I agree with you. The star ceiling is pretty much out at this point.
Yeah.
But, is there a room for him to fit into a role player niche to some extent?
Yeah, absolutely. When he learns to shoot threes. No, I don't even want to go that route necessarily where, if you just shoot threes. But in his case, that's actually the recipe. Because when you're a ball handler, you need that shot to be able to utilize that ball handling. Otherwise, people will just back up and just say, like, okay, you know what? You can stand there and dribble all you want 28 feet from the basket. That's not going to do you any good. You won't be able to pass to us because we're loading up on 4 other guys here. Like, no, he needs to have that shot. If you're a playmaker, if you're a good passer, which he is, you're going to need that 3-point shot to create space for your own passing. That is just a necessity. So I don't want to be that guy who just goes, well, he's a player, so he needs to make 3-point shots. No. It's just to bridge his talents together. He's going to need that 3-pointer, and he just doesn't have it yet. Just is okay. All right. But the outside of that, I don't know if he will ever project as like a high-end starter. I do think there is a future 6-man role carved out for him, because defensively he can be pretty solid. I think there's some rebounding upside as well. Like, maybe he comes in, if he doesn't learn to shoot, that is. If he learns to shoot from outside, I think he could become a starter, full-time starter.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't, he's going to be one of those hustle guys, like sort of like Andre Iguodala, but less athletic, who comes in, plays a little bit on the ball, but mostly works as a low-usage scorer who just rebounds, passes, play defense. But there are limits to how much you can play those guys.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an archetype of, like, what is, like, 10-year Justise Winslow career outlook? Like, who does he resemble in the NBA that carved out a long-term role? And no one is jumping to mind.
Kyle Anderson, in a way, I guess.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But even Kyle Anderson, he got better from a scoring perspective.
Yeah. He just had a career year shooting the ball.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I mean, it's the closest is probably Icky, honestly.
Oh yeah. I mean, just like the guy who came to mind right away was Tony Allen, but like Tony Allen was a significantly better defender
and worse, and significantly worse shooter. Actually,
right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Justise has to, if he's not going to, if the shot never comes around, he has to be elite somewhere else, whether it's as a playmaker, defensively could be another area, because he is versatile. I mean, he can guard 1 through 4, 2 through 4. So that's an area where I could see him making an impact here. And honestly, being able to be in the same locker room as Batum, like that's a guy who he could also model his game after. So maybe
James Johnson.
Oh, okay. I could see that.
Right? James is a little bit better shooter, or he used to be in his prime, but it's like there's not a great difference in their shooting patterns.
Yeah. James Johnson is more like rugged and physical than Justise.
Well, that's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
Because Justise is big.
Yeah, James Johnson. I could see that. Yeah, I'm interested until, I mean, again, you said it well. If Kawhi doesn't come back this season, it's effectively a lost season for the Clippers. Like, they are not going to be in contention for a title without Kawhi Leonard, as magical as their playoff run was this past season. But it'll be intriguing to see what Justise can do this year, if Kennard can get his feet under him, considering he went from almost 16 points per game with Detroit in 2019-20 to 8.3 last year, and they paid him a lot of money. That was they paid him a lot more than what he gave them last year. Terrence Mann, if he builds upon what he did last year, like there are some intriguing guys, younger guys to watch on this team, even if the ceiling is a lot lower than what we're used to. And hell, I mean, they're technically fifth in the West right now or they're tied with the Nuggets for the fifth best odds in the West, according to FanDuel. So, the betting market is at least hedging for the possibility of Kawhi returning late in the year, which, a partially torn ACL hopefully does not have the same length of recovery as a fully torn one. I'm sure they will play it very cautious with him, but fingers crossed, we will see Kawhi Leonard back by April, and we'll see a full strength Clippers team in the playoffs.
Right. And we should also note, Brian, that they have 3 rookies. And it's not that I expect them to play a whole lot, but like I said, with Kawhi out, I think it's necessary to actually give them a little bit of a ramp up. So if it turns out that Kawhi's out all year, then next year when he's back, then those guys would have had some reps. I think that's pretty important.
Agreed.